Just kind of spoiled you. There is another inside talk happening in a few minutes here. Next up, 3 really inspiring change makers. Each of them has a different background, but they all have a similar aim: establishing better conditions in the music industry. Because sometimes you're stuck in an unfair, uncomfortable, discriminating, or unhealthy situation, and you're not quite sure how to navigate yourself out of it. And the next minutes are dedicated to change that. We'll get practical tips like a how-to guide and also an impulse to change the current system into something more sustainable and healthy. As soon as we're set up here, I'll welcome to the stage our next speakers. Production manager Pembe Tokluhan, birthday girl, social campaigner Joanne Croxford. Yeah, there she is. Social campaigner Joanne Croxford, as soon as she's ready. Yeah, time management is also key. and then, of course, vocalist and activist Lorraine.
I do need this. I forgot about this, sorry.
You were just so quick. You're such a production manager. You're like, get me on stage now. Yeah. Thank you so much for that intro. It was fantastic. And Pembe, thank you for your talk. Happy birthday again.
Thank you.
It's great to share your birthday with you.
I know.
So this is a really broad topic. We totally appreciate that. And we're obviously from 3 very different places in the industry. But obviously we've heard Pembe's story about, where she's come from and what she does. And I felt it was important for us to also introduce ourselves. So the artist always goes first.
Okay, so I guess everything was said before about me. I'm a singer, I'm an artist, I'm an activist. So that's all. That's me.
Fantastic. What's your favorite food?
We had it yesterday.
Pad Thai.
Nice. Yeah, Vietnamese food.
Nice. So my name's Joanne Croxford. I, like Pembe, I work with bands on tour. So I've had the pleasure of working with some of the most incredible artists, including some that you might recognize the names of. So I'm really lucky in that I came into the industry and my first job was working with Robbie Williams. So that was it was a pretty big start. I don't know where you go from there. And then I worked with Sia as well in her early days, which was very exciting. I worked at the management company for Sia and Robbie. And then I had to take a few years out of the industry, and I actually moved to Berlin. So it's interesting because during this time, I came into recovery and got clean from drug and alcohol abuse. And I'm really proud to say, nearly 14 years later, I haven't used again, which is amazing. And it's probably, potentially another reason why I qualified to come here and share my lived experience about what that's like. Life on the road when you're in recovery is not easy. I also had the absolute pleasure this year of tour managing an artist called Peaches, who's based in Berlin. Many of you may know her. And I tour around the world with these other guys that you might also know. A lot of people don't. They're a band called Duran Duran. They were really big in the 80s. My name is Joanne when I'm on tour with them, which is, in their Birmingham accents, it sounds really funny. It sounds like, anyway, there is actually a cover band called Joanne. So we're here to talk about what it's like for us. Me moving with the band, you moving with the crew, you being the artist. So we all come from the same sphere. What are we seeing that are commonalities? Like, what are kind of common things that we're seeing in the industry as, the headliners as to what we see with our colleagues when they're unwell, or what we're seeing in the touring parties that we're touring with? What are the common mental health challenges that we see?
I think that a lot of people are scared to talk about their mental health, especially in touring. You're on the road for quite a long period of time, and you kind of just are in robot mode. You're just moving. Survival. It's like war. We were saying this, wasn't we? It's literally war. And you're surviving it. I think that one of the common things that you see is sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation makes you behave in ways you didn't know you could behave.
It taints things, doesn't it? It makes things very strange.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And when you're around a group or a party of people, especially when you're trying to be in the best form for artists and musicians and band members, it's really difficult. I think burnout through sleep deprivation is probably one of, I would say, the hardest things whilst being out on the road. Yeah.
Agreed. I think nearly on par with that is the lack of nutritional food. That's a big one.
After show food.
Oh, it's always pizza. Oh, it's always pizza.
Yeah.
As an artist, what are you noticing through your colleagues? What common challenges there are?
It's a good question. Maybe I can ask them. They're artists too. Yeah. For me, it's a bit different because I'm disabled. I'm a disabled person, and I have a lot of other things. Requirements. And sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's better. Yeah. But I don't get the point now.
So environmental challenges essentially can be really, really challenging for you. And I mean, that also feeds back into what we were just saying about when you're on tour, you're sleeping somewhere, unless you're in a tour bus, you're often sleeping in a different place every day.
You don't know where you're waking up.
You don't know where you're waking up. You don't know where your toothbrush is. You don't know when you're going to get your next shower if you're in a bus. And also on buses, you can't go to the toilet properly. So this is really glamorous. And we're really painting a beautiful picture of what reality of touring is. But also we love it. So is there anything else, Pembe, that you can think of that you think that is common?
Yeah. I think it's not whilst you're out on the roads. It's once you've finished.
Ooh.
I think it's kind of like that for maybe even like a production like this. You put so much work in it for so many months, and then you finish the job, and you might not have a job afterwards. And you're in this kind of weird phase of trying to rekindle with your friends. And you remember you have a life and a house and bills.
And you have to go to the grocery store.
And you have to go and get things. You don't have a car waiting for you outside.
Yeah.
But I think one of the hardest parts is you work really hard on this project, or this tour, or this production. And I'm sure you find this as well. You know, you work so hard. And then you're in this really weird space afterwards where you're like, I'm so useless. What am I doing with myself?
Who am I? And who am I?
Do you have that experience yourself as well?
Sure. Every time. Every single time. Yeah.
And what do you do to get out of that space? Do you just work on the next project?
No. I need a moment with myself and reconnect with myself and have 2 or 3 times just with me and myself and I.
No, it's interesting, isn't it, that we all 3 are saying the same thing. Like the importance and space of self. When you've done a big show, when you've been dropped off by that tour bus, when you've come in on that flight, or when you finished a show, there's that moment, isn't there, afterwards of, okay, who am I now that the lights are out? Now that the camera isn't on me, now that I'm not on stage, now that I'm not doing all these things. It's it's quite a lot. And I'm kind of looking at my question sheet and trying to recall exactly, you know, red flags that we've seen with our friends and people around us that make us realize that there is a challenge. When people are, you know, Pembe, I've heard you say this before as well, and I really like it. It's like when we're in a space where we can see people and we're around people, especially when you're touring or you're spending a lot of time in a studio with them, when something's not quite right. So what are these flags? How can we be working together as a community to say, okay, that's not quite right? What in both of your experiences where you think, yeah, that, like, for me, from my own experience, is when I was drinking way too much. Like not just a little bit. I was
Drinking is a
drinking lot.
massive thing, isn't it?
Drinking and taking too many drugs.
Yeah, drugs,
Yeah.
drink. I mean, it's always like drugs, rock and roll, isn't it? But actually, it's very detrimental. Don't do drugs, kids.
And it also doesn't need to be anymore. This is in 1973.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like the time of rock and roll has well and truly passed, and it's actually way more rock and roll to be, for me, again in my own experience, to be sober. Like that's way more interesting than doing what everyone else has always done. You know, okay, we love Lemmy and we love, you know, Motorhead, and like this like version of this tortured artist who's drunk and wasted, but actually like. It's their art that we connect with and the trauma within their art, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to be living that lifestyle. You know,
I mean, I tend to see a lot of people, the moment they step back on the tour bus after a gig, down as many bottles as they can. And I think that makes me realize when certain people are going through certain things. The people that maybe don't drink as much, kind of walking into the tour bus and picking up the first vodka bottle they see. I think that for me is a massive sign. Or when you're on a tour bus, it's difficult. It's like, I don't know how many people have been on a tour bus, but you're literally sleeping on bunk beds with like a curtain.
Similar to what is in a funeral when you're getting, it's very similar to a coffin.
It feels like you're in it. Yeah. And I find that a lot of the times you have this, not obligation, but kind of moral obligation to some extent to mingle with your crew members when you've finished up. And I think one thing that I identify is there are moments where people just go to their bed. And I go out of my way. I go and check up on those people. Then maybe they want to be left alone. Being left alone is really important. But I think for me, that's one thing I identify quite a lot in touring is that when somebody gets up and just goes into their bunk, or when somebody comes on the bus and starts drinking a lot of drink compared to what they'd usually drink, that for me is a sign that maybe that person just needs that space to actually just talk or deal with it in whatever way that they kind of need to.
So how do we deal with that gang mentality then, Pembe? For instance, you know, it's something that I speak about quite regularly. And I had a job interview last year and I didn't get the job because I asked about the drinking on that tour. Mm-hmm. And because I don't drink, they said, actually, and you know, when you're in a job interview and you're like, I've got this job, this is going to be excellent. Like I was like planning it in my head. And then I asked about that and they said, actually, do you know what? You're not right for our culture because I don't drink. So it's interesting because I totally understand what you're saying and that's an important piece around drinking. But what if you don't drink? And you do just want to have some peace and everyone else around you is drinking. Like, how do we manage?
I think it's important to have the safe space to be able to say things, right? I have an invisible disability. People will never know it. And when I go out on the roads, I inform people of it. And the reason why I do that is because there are certain things that need to be put into place for me to have a safe tour, for me to actually be able to just be out on the roads. I think that there's this, I said this in my talk earlier as well, there's this fear of talking up.
Speaking out. Yeah.
Such a big fear in the industry. You know, I might not get signed, I might not get a gig, I might not get the job. And it's like, actually, if you have healthy communication from the beginning, don't sacrifice your sanity for some money or a job. That's one thing that I would definitely say. Like, if I knew that somebody was coming on, if Joe was coming on the bus with us, and I was the production manager, there's usually 2 lounges on the bus. 1 lounge is sober. It's not hard.
It's not hard.
It's not hard
hard
to create space. It's just, first of all, listening to it, hearing what the person needs, and just accommodating it.
Yeah, I mean, I was on tour with Duran Duran last year, and the production manager said to me, I wasn't traveling on buses, but he said to me, do you want one of the buses to be a sober bus? Is that going to help you?
Makes the biggest difference, doesn't it?
All it was one decision. So decision makers understanding that little change can actually make a massive difference. And I guess I'd love to hear from someone who lives with a disability. You know, what do you find helpful? Like, what Tell us.
Just talk. Just have a conversation about it. And yeah, that's it. Being human. No, humanized. No. What's on the humanized.
But why are we so afraid to have these conversations about someone living with a disability?
I don't know.
Do you feel comfortable talking about your disability or your requirements or needs when going into a venue or a space that you're performing in?
Yeah. Right now. Not right now. Oh, it's. I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous about the.
I don't
English
understand
thing.
German, but they can speak German for you lot.
Und auch die beiden.
Yeah. Sure.
Gerne, warum nicht?
Pembe?
Ja, gerne. Pembe's happy with that.
The question was again.
How do you feel about communicating your needs?
Ja. Gerade fühle ich mich noch wohl damit, weil ich noch nicht so in einem großen Setting bin. Genau, da kenne ich die Leute, mit denen ich arbeite und die Venues und so. Aber ich weiß nicht, wie das dann aussieht, wenn es mal vielleicht größer ist oder so. Genau, gerade ist noch fein, aber einfach just talk. Ja.
Aber die Hauptsache ist, dass man spricht.
Yes.
Oder?
Ja.
Yeah.
Ja.
Talk about it. And I think, Pembe also said about speaking to power and getting them to understand. And I think it's interesting because, we also need to, for a lot of work that Pembe and I certainly do, this is a new friendship, but a lot of the work that we do in the music industry is we talk to those people in positions of power. We have a lot of those people in our contact books.
We challenge them.
We do, but I think I'd like to say we bring them with us, actually. I think that's because what my experience is when you call someone out, they're shamed. And I'm not in the currency of shaming people. Shame is not going to bring change. It's just going to make people go like this and say, oh, I tried to change and actually it didn't work and you called me out and now I feel like shit. So it's like, how is that being inclusive? We need to be inclusive in our positioning and how we're bringing people along with us. And we certainly saw it during lockdown. Pembe and I were involved in a lot of conversations with a group called the Tour Production Group, which I helped to found. And it was, it had members that won't mind me sharing who they are. So, Sam Smith's production manager was a part of that. Susie, who started the Backland, she's PJ Harvey's tour manager. You had Madonna's production manager in this space. But they were very keen on actually involving a trans voice in that space. So it's about that element of mental health, which I think is a really important piece, is inclusion and people feeling that they're a part of. Because we talk a lot about diversity and equity, but people need to belong. They feel like they belong in a space. So if you're then saying to people who are living with a disability or who live a sober lifestyle like me, you belong here because I see your needs and I'm instigating that in a way that's helpful. That's going to do 100 times more for my mental health than, somebody taking a mental health course and saying, oh, I'm mental health support certified or something. It's like, congratulations, like tick. But you actually didn't listen because I'm not feeling heard here. So, I guess there's a big piece in that. And how do you both feel about inclusion with regards to your mental health? How does it help you feel gesund? Wie kommt das?
Pembe, go first.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm going to make it up as I go. What was the question?
Basically, how is your inclusion? How is your sense of feeling included important in your mental health?
I think that it's important to acknowledge what your triggers are. I think that sometimes I'm better at it, but I don't realize that something that's done or said in a certain way or something I've seen might be a trigger to me, right? And you see it a lot with other people in your team. And I think it's important to acknowledge what works for you and to also be kind to yourself. Be kind to others and be kind to yourself. We're all going through things. We're all not the same since lockdown, let's be honest.
That's true.
So I think it's about being able to acknowledge what your needs are, which is what I try to do, which is not what everybody can do. That's important to acknowledge as well. Sometimes we might not have the capacity to acknowledge what we need. But being able to, I think it still all goes back to that thing of talking. It's conversations, it's communicating, it's being able to actually say, I don't know why I feel crap today, but I feel crap. Yeah. And that's okay. You know, you hear a lot, it's okay not to be okay. It genuinely is.
That's a really important point there, Pembe. It's like normalizing conversations around disability, normalizing conversations around sobriety, normalizing conversations around invisible disabilities. Also, I think, and it goes back to your point that you made when you did your keynote, it's like you can't be it if you can't see it. Yeah. And that's why I personally am very much an advocate for sobriety in the industry. You know, and I work with people who are trying to navigate the industry and be sober, because it is not easy. And the power of that community to be able to come together and call someone who understands is that. So I guess, how do you manage as someone who represents yourself, someone living with a disability, someone living with an invisible disability, how do you manage being that spokesperson in that space?
So sorry to switch in to German.
Do it. I understand certain words.
I'm feeling more comfortable with the German thing. Alleine das schon, jetzt zu sagen, auf einer Bühne zu sein, wo es eigentlich primär in Englisch ist. Ich glaube, so erstmal mit sich selber fein sein und dann kannst du nach außen gehen. Und genau, ja, Communication. Sag mir noch mal ganz kurz die Frage.
How do you, that's okay. How do you, as a person who speaks very, very clearly about living with a disability, how do you manage to do that? Because it's very like...
Ja, genau.
Ja,
also,
ja.
Wenn ich nicht stark selber sein kann von innen heraus, dann kann ich es auch nicht für andere. Oder halt einfach vor anderen stehen. So.
Wie kommt das, also richtig stark zu sein? Gute Frage.
Good question.
Deswegen sind wir hier.
Ja. Es einfach tun, machen und darüber sprechen, sich austauschen.
Community.
Yeah.
Community.
Mhm.
Pembe, how about
There's just one thing whilst we're on this topic that I want to share with everybody. I don't know how many people know about a carer or an access rider. We hear about catering riders. We hear about tech riders. But there is actually access and accessibility riders. And I think that people should be aware of it. I think that people should include more of it in their productions. When I work on a show, if I'm PMing a show and I get a crew in, I ask them if they have any access needs. You know, and it's not just about asking, because sometimes it can be daunting to say, I've got this thing that maybe needs to be tweaked. Will I get that job? Will I belong in that space? It's about having a moment to be able to acknowledge that in order for you to do what you're doing at your best, these are the things that you need. And having a conversation is great, but having something that a PM or a management or whatever can refer back to and go, these are all of our team members. You know, we all love a spreadsheet. It's no problem. There's no problem with adding another column.
I love that one of the
there.
organisers of the festival has laughed about that.
You know, and within that spreadsheet, or however method, I like spreadsheets, whatever method you like, just being able to be aware that you have something called an access rider. If you're working on a production, next time you're working on a production, you don't have to do it. It'd be great if you did. It's called allyship. Have a look at access riders and have a look at sending your team access riders so that they can, with confidence and without everyone watching them, have a moment to think about what they need to be put in place for them to feel safe.
Great. And just kind of building on that as well, Pembe, I know that there are tours in America that actually have a diversity rider. And I know like production managers like Alex Prince, who works on Tyler, the Creator, that's a really important thing Tyler says. You know, and I've seen that rider, and it dictates from your local crew need to be like 75% people of color. You know, so that the artist has the ultimate power to be like, these are the people I want around me. You need to make it happen, because that's our job. You're the boss, and we make it happen. And if it has to come back to protocol and having documents that state what our needs are, then so be it. You know, if that really brings around change, I think it's a beautiful thing. And, you know, even going down to, you know, we talk about mental health and riders, and I have seen a rider that actually asks for local dog and like cat sanctuaries to be brought in one day so that everyone can have a dog and cat day, all the crew. Like, it sounds really cute. It's so adorable, right? And like this amazing production manager that I absolutely adore, actually he's a tour manager, Henry Bordeaux, who again worked on Tyler the Creator. And he puts like pictures of what size dogs they would prefer, you know, not too big because it can't fit around the other thing. And it's really great because people come together, they have conversations, you know, and people's mental health is elevated, and that doesn't cost anything. You know, just bring in some local dogs and cats, you know. That's a really, it's a small thing, and I also, you know, I know that a lot of tours, and we're kind of going into the next part of the talk, which I was really keen on talking about, is like, what does good look like then? We've talked about all the things that are like, the shies of the, like, you know what I mean? But like, what is nice? What's good that we've seen that looks like good practice? So how can we actually put active things in place for artists, for crew, for you know, artists that I work with to make sure that they're going to have an enjoyable time? Because we work in entertainment. If we're not having fun, why are we here? So what can we do that's creative and great?
I think just even hearing about the dogs and cat thing.
I mean, it's incredible.
We have days off on tour, very rare. Which most
people like me never have a day off on tour.
Or 3 hours, which is great. 3 hours. That's
Get a shower when no one calls me. Wonderful.
Yeah. Whether it's a day off or whether it's a couple of hours off, I think sometimes it would be nice to do things that take you away from the industry a little bit. Whether that's like, you know what, the whole team's going to go and walk in the park. It don't cost a thing. Or we're going to go to this arcade. I love an arcade. Go to this arcade. So random. But just doing things that make you also remember that, like, you have a life and you're human and you have things that you enjoy beyond that. Yeah. And that's one thing that I'd say. What we had, I was on the band bus and they had a movie night. They just put a film on and everybody just sat there and just watched a random movie not about the creative sector.
Yeah. In their pajamas.
In their pajamas.
Yeah.
And I was like, doesn't this feel like a big sleepover? You know?
Nice.
And it
on
felt
wheels.
like home, on wheels. But I think for me, it's like little things like that make a big difference. Just being able to take yourself away for a moment and just do things that remind you of almost your life at home. Yeah.
I agree. It's great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Sounds.
I want to be on that tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you hear, like, I know Lizzo is also another person who goes out and does a lot of volunteer work in local communities to like help, because she's someone who's experienced homelessness. So she likes to go out and work at food banks. You know, I hear a lot of that work happens, and there are certainly organizations in America that actively like encourage, like, it's social campaigning on the road, essentially. And they encourage you to do that, whether it's engaging with, you know, local campaigning. I think this is something that you'll really like. It sounds like, I can tell you're interested. You know, it's to ensure that people don't forget that what the heart of we do is make change. We're change makers. That's what we do in our industry.
Yep, true.
You know, so what can we do, especially, you know, when we're in our spaces or we're on tour, that ensures that we're not just ridding the local economy of money. So it's not just about money. It's like, you know, how can I go in that space and feed the homeless? Or how can I go and, you know, I was on a tour in my very early days with an artist who was, and this is again, mental health related. They were very much a campaigner for like homeless pets, homeless animals. So we all got together and we crocheted and knitted blankets for dogs. And we donated them at the end of the tour to the local dog shelter. So like, you know, so we all got to enjoy time together doing something that wasn't on the tour, something different. And we brought crafting into it, which is something that's so mindful and it calms you down and it stops you and it's creative. And that was a really beautiful thing. And it was about being human. So it goes back to the human element, like bringing the human element in and, you know, how could that be better for you? What could be better for you? What can we do as people that support artists?
What do you mean?
How can we ensure that you feel seen and heard as a human? And is there anything that you think, let's talk blue sky thinking. When you go on tour one day and you're wherever you are, what does that look like for you as far as feeling good and safe?
Movie nights sounds great.
Let's do it.
Or
book me as the PM.
yeah,
We'll be there.
Yeah.
hanging together and yeah, have a good time, have fun. I guess that's all.
What do you do, Lorraine, that kind of makes you feel like you're human again? Like you might have 5 hours in the studio, solid. You can answer back in German. I just won't understand you. You have 5 hours in the studio and it's really hardcore. Like, what do you do to create that healthy environment for yourself? What does that look like for you?
I guess it's about the people around me and having a good mood and vibe and yeah, doing this as a team. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really important. And it's interesting because our jobs, especially when you get further and further along in your career, it's actually a very lonely place to be. And I think people don't realize that, especially with tour managers and production managers, because we're working all the time, we don't get any, and people laughed when I said, having a shower without someone calling me. That literally is the only time on tour when I get off. And I get maybe 4 hours of sleep. It's people, and this is I love my job, but it's incredibly draining. And you're sitting a lot of the time on your own in your hotel room, working on your own while everyone off is, the WhatsApp group is exploding and everyone's off go-karting and having a great time. And you're like, I'm eating shitty takeaway or, room service is ridiculously expensive that I can't even afford because I actually can't leave my desk because, it's responsibilities. People rely on you. So, I guess it's also important for us to mention this panel, that the things that do already exist, great, charities like Music Support in the UK, which I worked for a time, that was started by 4 people from the industry. So it was a tour manager called Andy Franks, who I know from Robbie Williams, an artist called Mark Richardson, who is from a band called Skunk and Nancy, and a music manager called Sam Parker, and someone who worked at a label, Matt Thomas. They got together and they were like, just after Amy Winehouse had died, they were like, we can't have more people dying. This cannot be the case that people keep dying. So they started a phone. They literally bought a mobile phone and they were like, right, we're starting a helpline. And they all just took turns listening to the helpline. And it's now become such a big, an important resource that I can only hope Germany one day gets. I know that you've got something called Pop Ambulance. I don't know if it's kind of on the scale that Music Support is, but I don't know if you've even heard of it. Maybe it's a new resource for you. Yeah. I don't know if anyone in the audience can give us some information about that, but it's a community initiative also, and then we've got spaces like the Back Lounge that I spoke about in my last talk where industry people can come together and talk and share about what's really going on. To take away the veil and the mask of the glamour that people tend to think that we live. Pembe, it's not glamorous, is it?
It's not as glamorous as people think. They're like, oh my God, you're in Paris today. Yeah, I've seen the airport and the venue. I've slept for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. It's nowhere near glamorous. I will always say this. I am still eternally grateful. There are people out there that, would wish to be in certain roles that I've been very, very fortunate to do. But it's not that glamorous. But, and just touching base on that, around, spaces. Find your community. I 100%. Would be lying if I said I know what organizations are out here in Germany, but there are organizations everywhere. And you know what? Like I said earlier, lockdown has really allowed us to become international and connect. Lorraine can call me whenever she wants now. She can come to London and sleep at my house. I think it's important to find your community and to find people and spaces that make you feel heard and safe. It can't be at the cost of your sanity. You've got to be able to find connections and networks and communities where they're the type of people that are allies and are supporting what you stand for. So I would say, if you're out there, whether you're an artist, whether you're a production manager, whether you're just interested in the industry, Just go and have, spend some time doing some research and find out who's out there and reach out to them.
And those people are going to be the people that save your lives throughout. It's like you can call them and ask them. And I think that is the thing. And I know you've said it before, Pam, and I agree. It's like your network is your net worth. And I'm a part of a really fantastic community called Roadies in Recovery. And it is essentially, it was started in lockdown. It started in America, and then we started the UK chapter. And it is exactly what it says it is. It's for Roadies in Recovery. So we meet 3 times on Zoom every week. And it's people, anyone in any 12-step fellowship, whatever they may be, we come together and we talk about what it's like being in recovery in the industry. And it's great because, someone will tune in from a tour bus, someone will be standing, at their console, or someone will be standing at flying, or, and we all come together and we're able to share and commune and communicate about what life is really like for us. And I think that that's the most important thing. Find your people. We're people that have found our people. And I think that's what makes me really strong and able to say what I need, is having people around me that support me, and no matter what I do for a job, they love me. I think that's so important, is having friends outside of the industry.
The amount of times that I've called Joe whilst being out on the roads is ridiculous.
I always get, have you got 5 minutes?
Have you got 5 minutes? Just a quick one, please. I think it's important. It's important to be able to talk to people. It's important to find your people. It's important to feel heard and feel seen. And it, like I said, if it has to be at the cost of me being a snowflake or calling things out, I don't care. I will call things out, and I will try to create more spaces for people, because I acknowledge that I may have an advantage that they don't, and whether you're an artist, whether you're, crew, whether you're tour manager, ultimately, or whoever, whatever you do out there, ultimately we're all human. We're all people. We have emotions, we have feelings, we have outbursts, we have triggers, we have so much things, and that's okay. But it's okay when it's in a safe space. I would hope that people think about mental health beyond just the kind of stigmaed things. I'd hope that people think about accessibility and inclusion in ways that they might not even thought of. Lorraine was telling me, Lorraine has merch. It's not here, but you can pre-order. Lorraine has a bag as part of her merch that has Braille on it. How much merch do you see that has Braille on it? There's so many little things that you can do to improve someone's mental health and to create a space for people.
I think that's a great way to end. Should we throw open the floor, see if there's any questions from the audience? Everyone looks like there is one. There's a hand that's gone up. Have we got a microphone for this person? We got a mic? Coming. Yes, please. Thanks. Oh, nice.
Should I stand also, maybe?
Please. It's like a sermon. Shall I stand?
Yeah, maybe so you can. Okay. First of all, thank you so much for sharing. This is, I have to emphasize that giving this topic a panel is already giving validation for people's challenges to feel safe to express. Which brings me to the point that I want to just hear you. Actually, it's more than I want to share with you a tiny incident I had, or situation where I want to hear your insight about, if you may. I feel all the time in the panel you asked the artists or people with challenges, what do they need? But we have to keep in mind that I'm talking as an invisible person with a challenge. It's hard for us to express what we need. Sometimes we come with a childhood that actually we were bullied from our challenge/disability. I do like to use the word challenge because a disability is a different ability. Just a side note. So I believe as managers, as producers, as tour managers, it's important to educate ourselves, to give space to the artists, to reach out to them, to really somehow type of push them to understand what is safer for them, what is comfier for them. Me, as one of the hats that I wear as a booker, and even having accessibility rider, I even started to put it in the contract where it's not provided, this is something that I have the right to actually call out the promoter for and provide what is needed. I'm reaching the level of contract because there's no enough conversation about this to be provided. So yeah, and on the other hand, I've had situations as a technical director where I come inside the theater and the companies I worked with, they told me, Moody, you should speak out about your eye challenge and tell them it's not, I need a few minutes to see the space, and that doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm doing. So they pushed me to speak out about this, and now I live in a much comfier environment when I work in different theaters. So please give me your insights about this, and that would be nice information, I think, for everyone to be shared. And if you have even stories that can reflect this better, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Do you know what it is? Thank you for sharing your story. I think it's really important not to make decisions about people without people. You have to collaborate. And it's so important that we stop talking. Like, people in power, stop talking and listen. What do people need? Rather than making assumptions. My assumption about what you may need is going to be very different from what you actually need. So, and who am I to decide your fate and your reality in your workspace? You know, and I think I think people need to be humbled and really listen. I think that's what I would say to that point. And I'm just so glad that you feel more comfortable in your workspace, because I'm sure you'll thrive in a different way as a result. You know, I don't know if any of the other panelists have anything to say.
I think it's just amazing to hear that somebody stood up for you, you know, and created that space for you. And I think that's something that we keep going back to, is having support, having allies, having people that make us be seen. I think you touched on something very, very important in regards to maybe not knowing what you need sometimes. And I think that comes with time, and I think that comes with space. The more space that's created for you to be seen, the more you would understand what you need to be in a better place, or to be able to just get on with things like anyone else would. But thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your experience. I'm sure a lot of people here appreciate it and can really relate to that.
One more down the front, I think, and then that will be it, and then we'll wrap. Thank you.
Fastest mic I've ever seen fly.
Amazing.
Thank you very much, all of you, for sharing. I had a question about fear, because we've had a lot of interesting panels today. So many things coming in the future that we can barely imagine, right? So many technologies. The working conditions that you're in will probably change and keep changing, and those changes will get faster. So I wanted to ask each of you one tip for dealing with fear.
Faith.
Meditate.
Faith.
Mm-hmm. Faith. It's all going to be fine. And this is the thing. I think people are so worried about what's going to be. It's like, actually, if we live in this very present moment, everything's fine. We have everything we need. You know, we are so lucky to live where we live. You know, this is a sweeping kind of statement, but certainly my environment isn't one that I'm in constant fear of. So it's, you know, it's faith. It's faith. And I think putting faith in the process, trust the process, keep doing the next best thing. Meditation is a beautiful part of that.
Yeah, I think, like, very quickly, because it's on minus time.
Oh my gosh,
but,
we're
it's
flashing
at us in red. Sorry, I've got ADHD, so there's a disco ball up there. There's so much going on. It's really
There's
cool.
a lot happening.
There's a lot happening. The reason why I say meditation is because I'm Buddhist, and I found Buddhism 4 years ago, and we hear a lot about meditation, and I was like, there is no way I can sit in silence and just hear my own thoughts. But I meditate and I chant at the same time. And I think that just, you know, meditation can be done in so many different ways, but a moment of stillness can sometimes actually take some level of fear away from you. Whether that's counting to 10, you know, which used to really frustrate me when my teacher used to say, just breathe and count to 10. But it works. You know, whether that's 5 minutes to meditate or whether that's to just go for a walk. I think meditation can be done in many ways that allows you to have a moment to get away from that fear.
And it can be literally, there's some amazing apps, but breath work is something I'd really recommend as well. Breathing is just incredible. It's amazing how it can just center you and bring you back into the mind to be able to make
Inhale and exhale.
Yeah. And I think just accept that fear is a real thing.
Totally.
We all fear. I think that if you're too comfortable, you're doing something wrong. You kind of need to be uncomfortable to then grow. So fear can be good as well. It doesn't always have to be that fear is this negative connotation. It's actually healthy to have fear.
And get off social media.
And get the hell
Get off social media. I am not on Instagram for that very reason. Like, I made the decision when it started to not be on Instagram. And I tell you what, I am blissfully unaware of what's going on Instagram because I'm living my life. But I also am mindful that those tools are also what people use for their livelihood. But it's about balance and being honest with yourself. Yeah. I think we're good.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.